What makes the Swish pattern so powerful? Two main reasons. It's easy to learn, it's simple to use. And that's easy to learn and simple to use, that's one reason. And the second reason is it's a piece of identity work. It's rarely ever taught that way in most NLP institutes. And I'm going to show you how, in fact, it is a piece of identity work. There's also two reasons why people struggle to make the Swish pattern work. First reason is it's being taught incorrectly by most NLP teachers. The first two NLP practitioner trainings I went through, both times with different teachers, it was taught incorrectly. The other reason is people don't understand why it works, so they make mistakes that prevent it from working. And that was me. That was me until I learned the correct way to do it. And I went deeper than that and really understood why the Swish pattern works. And that goes back to what I was saying about identity work, which I'm going to get into here. So if you do what I show you in this video, you are going to know how to do the Swish pattern correctly, and you're going to know why it works. So important. What's the point of working at this, practicing at it, if you don't know how it works, why it works, and you can't make it work? Before we get into the deep dive of this, you can follow along with a free PDF of instructions on how to do the Swish pattern. You will find that linked in the description of this video. Download that free PDF and follow along as we go. It's really important. I'm going to be explaining it step by step, and we're going to go through it as if we're actually doing it. Now, if you want to go even further than this, and I suggest that you do, there is a training that I created called the Ultimate NLP Practitioner Training. We make it available so inexpensively at this time that there's no reason not to get it. And I'll say this multiple times, so bear with me if it gets redundant. Learning one NLP technique, one NLP pattern is like a drop in an ocean. NLP, the study, being like an ocean. There's a lot there. And when you learn something in the context of the greater model of Neuro Linguistic Programming, then you learn how to really make things work. You become a real practitioner, you become highly skilled, and that's going to help you make this process, the NLP Swish pattern, so much more effective. All right, so the agenda today is, like I said, we're going to walk through every step of the process of the Swish pattern. Then I'm going to give you some specific exercises so you get the deeper understanding of why it works so that you don't make those mistakes. I've never taught this part of it, these exercises that I'm going to give you. I've never taught this before regarding the Swish pattern. I've made other videos about the Swish pattern. This is something I have not taught yet. So we're going to do that today. Now, why didn't the Swish pattern work for me? Well, like I said, it was taught to me incorrectly. What was really taught to me was not really the Swish pattern, it was something called chaining, where you're chaining one thing to the next to move you through a process of changing your behavior. And that can be effective if you're really specific about the behavior that you want to engage in, and you can engage in that behavior. I'm going to go into more what I mean by this, but it's very limited. It's very, very limited. And this is why I couldn't make it work, because when I would do the Swish, it was tied to a very specific behavior in a very specific context rather than the identity that I mentioned earlier. Because of that, unless I was in that specific context and that specific behavior was available for me to do, I couldn't make it, wouldn't work. It would break the pattern. And that's how it's being taught. In other words, content is being imposed on it. And what NLP is really about, it's about structure versus content, or structure over content. We will fill in the content if we have the right structure. We will fill in the appropriate content to these structures. So if you think of all that's going on inside of you, all this information going on inside of you, all your representations, that's what you're really living from. We call that your map of reality. So if it's not structured well, and it's structured in such a way that it only allows for certain types of behavior, which is what I'm referring to as content, then you're very limited. And we want to go beyond that. We want to focus more on the structure that enables lots of different content for you to be able to fill in, because life is not static. Life is complex, it's ongoing, it's moving, it's breathing, it's living. So you got to be on your toes. You got to be able to fill in the content as needed. But if your structures are too limiting, if your map is too limited, then the content is not going to be available to you. So we want to open things up to more and more possibilities. If you've seen my work on values, I talk a lot about values, and the wonderful thing about values is that they're intentionally vague. And because they're vague, they allow for a lot of possibilities. So you could think of like a specific goal versus a value. The value is what you really want to fulfill, but we tend to hyperfixate on the goal, which is very limited. So we try to squeeze ourselves into a goal, and it may or may not work for us. It may or may not fulfill us. But what we do know is our values do fulfill us. And there's many different ways to fulfill those values. So that's a way of opening up to more and more possibility. How this came about, my story behind this is I had learned NLP. I had learned NLP very well. I'd been to multiple practitioner trainings, multiple master practitioner trainings. I've been to trainer training in NLP, being taught the Swish pattern over and over incorrectly. And I had completely abandoned it. I had stopped using it because I couldn't make it work. So I was like, I'm not going to use something that doesn't work. I wasn't using it with my clients. And then serendipitously, Steve Andreas popped into my life. I've told this story many times, so I'm going to skip it here. I've told it in other videos. And I was working with him for a little while, and he sort of caught on to what I was really after, which was great because I didn't know what I was after, but he caught on to it. And he said, I created this model called the self-concept model. Go read the book, do the exercises, and come back to me if you need help. I'll be here to help you. Well, the introduction alone in that book was amazing. It answered so many of my questions. One of the things he mentioned was the Swish pattern. I was like, really? The Swish pattern? I've never been able to make that work. That doesn't seem like it's so powerful. Why is he mentioning the Swish pattern? And he mentioned that it was a piece of identity work. I was like, the Swish pattern? Identity work? That doesn't add up. I read more, and what he's saying doesn't sound like the Swish pattern that I learned. And what he tells me, or what he wrote in the book, was to not impose content on the ideal image that you swish. He said, don't make your ideal self engaging in any particular behavior, and make sure your ideal self is in no particular context. And I was like, is that even possible? Can we really do that? Can we make an image of our ideal self, our self who is fulfilling our highest ideals and our greatest values without seeing any particular behavior and without being in any particular context? I wasn't even sure if that was possible. So I went back to Steve and I was like, where's this coming from? I've never seen this before. And he was shocked because he knew who my teachers were. And he said, there's no way they taught it to you like that. I said, yeah, they taught you to create a specific behavior that you'd rather engage in, and whatever context is good too, and swish it that way. And he really didn't believe me. And I said, Steve, I can show you my manuals, it's in there. And the next email I got from him was, you're right, I looked it up. My teachers had their stuff online, so you could see what they were teaching. And he said, you are right, they are imposing content, they are putting it this way. And he said, it's wrong, it's just wrong. This is not the right way to do it, and if it hasn't been working for you, that is why. It's because they're imposing content on it, or they're teaching you to impose content on it. So what does all this mean? What am I talking about? What is this content versus structure and this ideal self? Well, let's find out. So you want to go to that PDF that I mentioned, and let's do it. So when you're working with the Swish pattern, you can use, the PDF, it starts off with anxiety. And that is a way of code, or a way of identifying a compulsion. When we experience anxiety, it usually feels like it's a compulsion, like we can't stop ourselves. We just start engaging in anxiety. The one I hear about the most is social anxiety. People are in a social situation and they feel like they can't help it. Now they start feeling anxious, and then they have to remove themselves, otherwise experience a panic attack. And it doesn't seem to be anything that they have control over. we don't want to limit it to just anxiety. This could be a bad habit. This could be smoking. Like you tell yourself you're not going to smoke a cigarette or you're going to quit smoking, and then something happens and you just find yourself suddenly with a cigarette in your hand, puffing away. It can happen with food. You tell yourself, okay, I'm going to be good. I'm not going to eat things that are not good for me because I know I'm going to gain weight. I'm trying to lose weight. And then suddenly you find yourself eating a donut or something like that. So those are some other possibilities. But again, you could use this for anxiety. One of the most common people, or I guess profession I have coming to me recently are traders, day traders. People are putting out this information that NLP can help day traders. So these day traders find me on YouTube and they come to me and say, I've been hearing about this Swish pattern. Can you do that with me? I was like, yeah, actually I can. What I find working with traders is they have a very specific protocol. They have their own rules, their own principles, their own structures. And what happens is while they're trading, they start getting emotional in the sense that they have emotional attachments to the money. They start getting, the fears start coming up and they start getting worried about losing money or on a trade. And what ends up happening is they start violating their own rules. And then they lose because they didn't follow their own rules and their own principles. They lose money anyway, or they don't make as much money on a trade that they could have. And they're like, what happened? It just felt like, they couldn't even help themselves. It was just pure compulsion. They just found themselves suddenly going down this rabbit hole of fear and pulling their trades or making bad decisions. And so we do the Swish pattern, and it helps with that. So what you want to do is you want to identify something like that, whether it's anxiety, it could be a bad habit, anything that feels like a compulsion, that once it starts, you feel like you can't stop it. It's just happening and it's going on, and here you go. And then you end up doing the thing that you don't want to do. So identify what it is that you want to work with. And then the second step is to find the cue picture. We call it the cue picture. It's that picture in your mind that we can also think of it as a threshold. Once you get to that point, there's a point of no return. It's like a trigger. It sends you off into the bad behavior. Now, most of the time, how you're going to find this is by thinking of a time that this recently happened, where you engaged in the compulsion and you went with it. And if you rewind the video and you move it back, keep going back and back until that moment where you're on that threshold, where you see an image of you haven't quite gone to that point of no return, and you can feel that trigger's about to happen. It's just about to send you over the threshold, and once you cross that threshold, there's no turning back. That's the image you're looking for. Now, for most people, that is going to be a very associated image. What do I mean by associated? When you think about memories, and it doesn't have to only be memories, it could be thinking about imagining something happening in the future. You can do it right now. You can imagine yourself outside of yourself, looking at yourself. That would be disassociated. So like if you were looking in a mirror, looking back at yourself. That's what we call disassociated. So anytime you're outside of your body looking at yourself, whether you're inside the memory or even outside of the memory looking at yourself like you're watching a movie, that's what we call a disassociated image. Now when we're disassociated, we have a sense of a bit of disconnect. It's not how we want to live our lives 100% of the time, but it is a place we can go to sort of disconnect from what's happening. And this is also very useful when we're in a problem situation, we feel really stuck. If we disassociate, then we kind of step outside. It's kind of like thinking outside of the box. You step outside of the situation and you look back at yourself struggling with this problem, and now you have more information available to you. So that's what is useful and helpful with disassociation. Now associated, when you're associated, you're more present. So that's the positive side of being associated. This is where you really focus. It's also where flow happens. And one of the main differences between an associated flow state and an associated sort of trigger image that sends you into a compulsion is that a flow state has a lot more flexibility. There's a lot more going on where you have more space typically, you have more bandwidth, there's more resources available to you, and that's what creates a flow state versus a hyper-focused state or a hyper-focused image where it's kind of like tunnel vision. You're so associated that everything else is blocked out, and all you can see is whatever this thing is that's compelling you to move in this direction, which we don't want. So you're looking for that tunnel vision image where you're just on it and you're gone. And we're looking for that trigger image, meaning that threshold where if you just go a little bit further, then it goes beyond that point of no return. So if we're talking about a smoker, this would be maybe the smoker sees a cigarette or sees someone else smoking a cigarette, and then everything just kind of zeroes in on that cigarette, and that's the trigger image. Now they're engaged, there's that point of no return, they're going to smoke a cigarette, they just need to get their hands on one as soon as possible. Same thing for somebody who doesn't want to overeat. They see food or something like that, it triggers them, and then they're going for it. With anxiety, it would be like I'm in a social situation and my perspective starts to narrow, and I see something and boom, I'm triggered, I'm into the anxiety. So we want to find that image. Now I'm focusing on image. Most people are visual. That's why I focus on this so much. And even people who are auditory, a lot of times this still happens to them in a visual sense. But there is such a thing as an auditory trigger or an auditory cue that might send someone off into anxiety or engaging in a bad habit. Think about like a critical voice. That's what might happen. And I used to have that myself, even though I'm not very auditory, but I used to be maybe having a good time, or I used to be very focused, or I might be doing very well at something and I'm moving toward my goal and I'm actually getting close to it. And then suddenly a critical voice comes in and just sends me in a different direction. And it feels like I can't stop. And maybe that critical voice also induces anxiety. And then I feel like there's that point of no return and I just crash and then I'm done, I give up. So the cue can be auditory. All right, so once you find that image, I'm gonna keep referring to it as an image. Once you find that image, you want to be clear about what that is and then set it aside. Then we want to create your ideal self-image picture. Now this is a picture of you, an image of you, disassociated, and this is the ideal you. This is the you who is already fulfilling all of your highest ideals, all of your highest values, has solved all of your problems. Ideal you. And you want to make sure that you see yourself not engaging in any particular behavior. And it can help to just see your head and shoulders. Some people want to see more. If it's okay to see more, you could see your entire body if that works for you. You just don't want to see you engaging in any particular behavior. It's sort of like you're standing there, but there's something about you that seems really alive. There's something about you that's very vibrant. This is the most attractive you that you could possibly be. In fact, when you see this image, you immediately feel like a pull, like you want to become that you. You want to become that person because that's the you want to be. And you want to see this image in no particular context. No particular context. And don't worry, we're going to go into why this is and how it works, and the exercises I'm going to give you are going to make this even easier, because what I often hear oftentimes is people say, well, you know, I can't really create that image. You can, and I'm going to show you some easier ways, some exercises you can do. We'll deconstruct it a little bit. All right, so you want that very attractive you, the you who is fulfilling your highest values, your highest ideals, who has solved this problem, and many more, has solved all of your problems, okay? You want to generate that image. Now, once you've generated that image, we always want to do what we call either an ecology check or a congruence check, whichever word you prefer. Ecology tends to be how you feel about the systems around you, the relationships around you. If you get what you want, if you became that ideal you, would it disrupt anything around you? If so, is there a problem that you need to address? Most of the time it's going to be congruence, like, oh, if I become this ideal me, maybe there's some sort of like objection, some part of you that says, I don't think this is a good idea, or some sort of resistance. Now, I'm not going to get into a full-on parts integration, but that's how you want to deal with that objection. You need to make sure that you satisfy these objections. And if you're not familiar with parts integration and conflict integration, I've done plenty of videos on that as well. So if you're looking at this ideal image of you and you check in, do I have any objection to becoming this me? And there's any part of you that says, yeah, we don't like this, or yeah, there's a resistance, or there's a concern, you want to do a parts integration. I did a recent video on that, even did a demonstration, so you can find that and deal with this objection. If you don't deal with the objection, this won't work, Because when we make a change, the only reason why the change lasts is if there's no resistance to that change. If there's resistance to it, we need to get in touch with the positive intention behind the resistance and then integrate it into what we're doing, the change, or in this case, the ideal image. Okay. Once you've done all that, once you have your compulsion image, you have your ideal image, you've checked in, there's no resistance, no objection to becoming that ideal you. Now we want to set up the swish. So how do we set up the swish? We set up the swish by first starting with the trigger image, the image that makes you go toward in the direction that you don't want to go, the bad habit or the anxiety, whatever it is. So set that up, and then you want to set up your ideal image somewhere that is not easy to see, like below. A lot of times people put it below the trigger image and small and dark. You can put it in the corner of the compulsion image, make it small and dark. Any corner works. Some people actually put it behind and have, when they swish, they actually have the ideal image come through the compulsion image and take over. Either way, what you want to do here, what the swish is connecting the compulsion image to this ideal image, and we want to rehearse when you see that compulsion image that it automatically, instead of triggering you to go toward the habit or the anxiety or whatever it is you don't want, it triggers the ideal image to blow up and take over your field of vision. That's the idea behind this. So you can play with different ways to do it. The main thing is to make sure that you have a connection between the two, so that when we rehearse this enough times, that the compulsion image will trigger that ideal image. So if you need it in the corner of the compulsion image, if you need it underneath, if you need it behind it and it comes forward, whatever works for you, works for you. And you might have to try it a few different ways. I was recently teaching this at a conference, and the way that we set it up, it just didn't work for the person. So we had to start over again and find a different way to make it connect. So that's the main thing. And we're going to test it. And when we test it, that's what you need to check for. Does it trigger that ideal image? So you queue up the image, compulsion, ideal image, and then you swish. So the best way to do this is when you're looking at that compulsion image, when you start to feel like you're hitting that threshold and you're about to go in, then you swish. Swish that ideal image up, make it take up your field of vision, make the compulsion image go down or go away. It needs to get out of sight as that ideal you completely takes over. And again, like I said, you might have to practice this in different ways to find out what works for you. Okay, so you're going to do this. It usually takes between 5 to 7 times of swishing it and going at it faster and faster and faster. Might take up to 10 times. And once you do it, you want those two images to be so connected that every time you see the compulsion image, swish, that ideal image comes up. Now, while you're practicing this, while you're doing it the 5 to 7 times, it's really, really important that when you reset the images, that you're not swishing them back. And a lot of people make this mistake. In fact, I've taught this live, taught people how to do it. I was teaching it in actually the Ultimate Practitioner training, which is, like I said, linked in the description if you want to do that training. And I taught it, and I told everybody, emphasized it. I said, when you reset the images to practice the swish, because every time you swish, your ideal image comes up, your compulsion image goes away. And then I'd say, okay, now set those images back up, but do not swish it back. Inevitably, someone always does. And then the very next day at the training, a person came back and said, every time I swish, it swishes to my ideal self, and then it swishes back to the compulsion image. And I was like, I know, I told you this. When you reset the images, if you swish them back, then you're just connecting them to swish back, and you get this yo-yo effect. And so what happens is you start to engage in the compulsion, and then your ideal image switches up, and then you go, oh, okay, good. And then it swishes back to the compulsion, and it swishes back to the ideal image. This is going to drive you crazy. It's not going to give you the result that you want. Okay, so you practice this 5 to 7 times, maybe 10 times if you want to be really sure. And then you test it. You clear out your mind, you think about something else for a little bit so that you're not thinking about this anymore. And then you think about the compulsion. You think about the thing that you don't want to do. And when this works, that ideal image should swish automatically and fills up your field of vision, and it stays there. And that's how you know it's working, if it does it automatically, okay? If you want to do another congruence check, never hurts to do that, okay? So every time you do a swish, and you can do a swish with many different things, and one of the questions I get often is, can I use the same ideal image? Yes, absolutely. It's your ideal image. It has no content, has no behavior, has no context, so you can use it for anything. And that's the clue about the identity work, which I'm going to go into a little bit. All right, so make sure you test it. Make sure it triggers automatically, triggers that ideal image to come up. There's no yo-yo effect. The ideal image stays up, and you're good. This will become more powerful when this whole pattern becomes unconscious. So one of the reasons why compulsions are so powerful is because you don't realize this pattern that's happening. You don't realize that you're going into this overly associated image and that you're getting sucked into it and you're just going for it. If you were conscious of this, you would at least have a fighting chance to interrupt that pattern. But you don't, because you're not conscious of it. So when we change the pattern and we interrupt it and hijack it and move it away with the ideal image, when that becomes unconscious, then it becomes so much more powerful because you're not even having to try. It's happening automatically, and that's what we want. So we're changing an automatic pattern, a program that's in your unconscious. We make it conscious, we change it, we let it slip back into unconsciousness, and then you don't have to try. You don't have to work at it. So what I'm getting at here is you don't want to practice the swish every day. I get people who say that all the time. Well, how many times a day should I practice this? Or for how many days should I practice this? No, all you need to do is practice it until the swish happens automatically. Once you test it and it's happening automatically, you're done. Let it go. And then think about, like, maybe a week later, mark something on your calendar to check in. Did you engage in that bad habit throughout the week? If you didn't, you know the swish is working. You know it's working. And you can keep tracking that. I'm going to check in every week to see, did I engage in that bad habit? Did I have anxiety? Whatever it might be. And if you're not having those things, it worked. The swish pattern has worked for you. That's one of the weird things about NLP is that sometimes it's hard to know if it actually worked, because once we change something and it becomes unconscious and it's automatic, we don't really think about what we were doing before. We just kind of go about life. It's like, yeah, everything's fine, everything's good. And then you can check in with people sometimes about this, and they have this kind of what we call NLP amnesia, and they were like, oh yeah, it wasn't really a problem ever. It's like, yeah, it was. We worked on this. You had a habit of smoking, or a habit of overeating, or anxiety, or something like that, and they'll have this feeling of like, well, but no, I don't have to think about it or try. And it's like, that's the whole point. The whole point is it's an automatic pattern now. It's an automatic pattern leading you to what you want to do rather than what you don't want to do. So that's really the steps of the swish. But let's do some deconstruction and a deep dive. So what I was taught wrong was, like I said, adding in the content, like, oh, well, what behavior would you rather do than this bad habit? And where would that happen? Like working out in a gym, like working out would be the ideal behavior, and being in a gym would be the context. Well, that doesn't work. So if you think about it, like if the person who eats things that are bad for them, and you say, okay, what would you rather do instead of eat food that's bad for you? And the person might say, well, I'd rather go work out at the gym. And so instead of swishing an ideal image, they swish an image of that person going to the gym. Sounds good, right? Well, what happens when you wake up at 2 in the morning and you really want that midnight snack or 2 a.m. snack? You can't go to the gym. Gym's probably not open. And even if it was, you're probably not getting out of bed, changing out of your pajamas, putting on workout clothes, and going to the gym at 2 a.m. So that would break this pattern. And this is why imposing content on it, the behavior and the context, destroys it. This is why this is a structure versus content that I was talking about. So if you have content imposed on it, it narrows everything. And the only way that this is going to work is if that is available to you, the gym and the behavior of working out. But even still, what if you're at work? You know, the gym might be open, but you can't leave work. And you feel that compulsion to overeat, you can't leave work to go to the gym. So the ideal image, because it has no behavior and no particular context, leaves it open to more possibility of behaviors you could engage in, whatever is available to you at the time. That's what makes this so powerful. So instead of the swish being about a particular behavior in a particular context, the swish is now about your ideal you. The swish is about your identity. And guess what? You take you wherever you go. So you don't need a gym. You don't need equipment to work out. You're going to, when that swish happens, and like I said, it's better when it's unconscious, when that swish happens and that ideal you pops up, then you're going to fill in the content based on where you are and what's available to you. That's what makes this so powerful. Okay. Once again, if you want to really learn the swish and so many more patterns and techniques of NLP, which is really makes everything else makes sense. Learning something in a greater context makes it easier, and learning in a community of practitioners just like you who need people to practice with, who have questions. The NLP, the Ultimate NLP Practitioner Training is that. It has good, solid training. Everything is proper NLP. The material was created by Stephen, Connie, Ray, Andreas, the giants in the field of NLP. I used their material with their blessing, of course. And it's the most complete NLP training you're probably going to find online. Is based on a 24-day training. I taught it live, and I also created the online version concurrently, and I geared it toward people learning it online. So it's not like you're just watching a bunch of videos of me teaching to a group. You're going to get slides and directly me teaching you these processes and techniques, and like I said, a community. Okay, you'll find that link in the description. So let's get into some experimenting, especially for those of you who have trouble with creating that ideal self-image without behavior and context. So think about something you can easily see yourself doing well. And I specifically want you to see yourself doing it. I don't want you to be associated. I want you to be disassociated. Now, one of the problems I ran into the first time I tried this with a group of people, I was trying it actually in London. I didn't expect that some people, when they would disassociate, they would actually feel kind of bad or kind of like, ugh. Like, well, no, what makes this, what you're asking me, Damon, to think about something that I do well, I'm associated. That's what a lot of people would tell me. And when I disassociate, it takes that away. So there's a way to get this to work for you, if that's you. When you disassociate and you see yourself doing something well that you enjoy doing, make it interesting, make it motivating. This is what motivation is. When you see something in front of you that you want. That's what motivation is. If you already have it, you don't have motivation to get it because you already have it. So I'll give you an example of what I mean. If you were to imagine seeing in the distance a party, and at that party are all of your favorite people, and at that party is activities, that people are engaging in activities that are your favorite activities. So you see in the distance a party of your favorite people doing your favorite things. What do you feel when you see that? You feel like you want to get over there as fast as possible, right? You feel very motivated to move in that direction. So this is the same thing. What I'm talking about with the thing that you're going to see yourself doing well. Now, once you were at the party, if you imagine being at the party, sure, that's going to feel fun, that's going to feel enjoyable because you're there, you're present, you're doing the activities, you're doing it with your favorite people. But you're not motivated to go there because you are there. So when we overly associate, we're not very motivated to do the thing that we're associated into doing, right? Because we're doing it. Or we're not motivated to get the thing that we already have because we have it. If I wanted $1 million and already have the $1 million, not very motivated to go out and get $1 million unless I want another $1 million. But you get what I'm saying here. So if you're one of those people who is associated into the thing that you like doing, that you do well, and when you disassociate, it feels like, oh no, I'd rather be associated into it. I understand. Create an image where you see yourself doing something well, and when you see that image, you feel really motivated and compelled to associate into the image. Just don't associate, okay? So see that image and you should feel, instead of like, ugh, I'd rather be in there, you feel like, oh yeah, I want to get there as fast as possible. That's what motivation is. So create that image of you doing something well that you like doing. And when you see yourself doing it, you probably see a context, right? So when this happened in London, the person was a drummer. And whenever I had them disassociated, it was like, oh, I see myself drumming, but I don't like this because I would rather be drumming. And then I had to work with him to get it to a motivational image, a motivational movie, okay? And then now he was seeing it. And of course, if he was drumming, he saw himself where his drums are. He saw himself in a room in his house where his drums are. That's your context, okay? So seeing yourself doing what you do well has a context to it, doesn't it? So see all of that. And once you've got all that, then what you want to do is slide like a black screen or a green screen, or maybe just a black curtain or a cloak between you and the context. So you see yourself doing the activity, but now you've removed the context. So like I said, just you could see a black screen behind you, a green screen behind you. One way to think of this is if you were doing this on a stage with a black curtain behind you. Removing the context. And when you see yourself doing this thing that you do well and that you really enjoy doing with no context, what does it feel like? What do you feel? For most people, what they're going to feel like is they could do this activity anywhere, right? Because there is no context anymore. So that opens it up to the possibility of doing this anywhere. So for my friend who was struggling, and when I was first teaching this in London with the drums, if we remove the context, or we slide that cloak between him drumming and the context of his bedroom, or whatever room he was in his house, now he feels like I could do this drumming anywhere. He could do it on a stage, he could do it at another friend's house, he could do it out in the open in a forest, because now there's no context. So now we just open up the possibility of doing this behavior anywhere, in any context. And that can be very useful if you want to use this for something else where you feel like you can only, and people complain about this a lot, where they say like, oh yeah, you know, I talk so well when I'm teaching in a classroom, but the moment I have to step out and give like a public speech somewhere else, I stammer, I stutter, I don't do very well. Okay, well, if you took that image of teaching in a classroom, slide that cloak between that person and the classroom, and all they see is themselves teaching with no context, that's going to feel like, I can do this anywhere. And it's going to enable that person to generalize that behavior into any context. So once you've done that, and you've experienced that, and make sure you do this, make sure you do the exercise. You will not gain the full understanding without doing the exercise. Very important that you do the exercise. After you've done that exercise and you've gotten that feeling of like, yeah, I could do this behavior anywhere once I block out the context. Now bring the context back. So now you have the context and you see yourself doing the activity. And now stop doing the activity. Stay in the context, but stop doing the activity. And see yourself in a sort of a ready mode where you're not just like apathetic and you're just low energy. No, not that. You want to see yourself in like you're ready to do any behavior. Not any particular behavior, just any behavior. You're energetic, you're ready to go. You're ready to go when whatever starts, but it hasn't started. So just see yourself in that context, not doing any particular behavior. And what does that feel like? More than likely, what that will feel like is you have a range of behaviors that you could do at that moment. You're not stuck with one behavior. In that particular context, you have a wide range of behaviors to choose from because you haven't made a choice yet. You haven't decided to do any particular behavior. So now it's open to all possibilities. So practice this until you get that feeling of I can do this anywhere. Okay, so you've had the experience of removing context, which makes you feel like you could do a particular behavior in any location, any context. You've also now experienced the context, but without doing any particular behavior, so that leaves it open to any possibility of any behaviors you could do. Now, when you revisit your self-image, your ideal self-image with no particular behavior and no particular context, this should be a lot easier for you now. It should be a lot easier for you to envision that ideal image of yourself in no particular context and no particular behavior. You just see the you who you know is living your ideals, living your values, who could engage in a wide range of behaviors, and who could do it in any context. It's just the you that can do that, the you who is fulfilled. There's just something about that you, that vibrant looking you, that can engage in any behavior and do it in any context, whatever you're ready for anything. So this should help you be able to build up that ideal self-image, which becomes very powerful and you can use in any situation. Now, when you have that ideal image and you do a swish pattern now, it's going to be very powerful, because what happens is that you have that compulsion, whatever it is you don't want to do, whether it's anxiety or behavior. And when you see that very tunnel vision, compulsion, triggering image that pushes you over that threshold, and then suddenly this ideal image comes swishing in, hijacks your attention, and you go, ooh, yeah, that's who I want to be, because that's the me who is living up to my potential. Then you can plug in, so it interrupts that pattern and hijacks your attention away from the compulsion, and now you feel compelled to be that you, so you naturally, easily find whatever behaviors are available to you in that context to engage in. Okay, I have a little extra time, so what I'll do now is I'll explain a little bit how this fascinated Steve Andreas, and it inspired him to create the self-concept model. Because what he was looking at with this ideal image was clear to him that this was a piece of identity work. And he thought to himself, okay, if just by removing all this content, it leaves it open to so many more possibilities and it guides me toward fulfilling my ideal values, what if we take this deeper and we find out, what if we filled in all the content and structured all that content into qualities that we value, that makes us who we want to be? So instead of leaving it open with no content, what if we did go ahead and bring that content in, but not me as a teacher telling you what content to bring in, you can pull that content in because of the way we structure this. And so I'm going to show you how we do that. Let's see, let me move some of this stuff out of the way. So everything comes down to the level of experience. And experience has a structure as well. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And this is how we structure information so that we can understand it, so that we're not overwhelmed by it. Life is not really a beginning and a middle and an end. All that you've experienced throughout your entire life, truly experienced, is one continuous flow, unbroken, of continuous consciousness. Now, if we just did it that way, we wouldn't be able to plan for the future. We wouldn't be able to make decisions based on experiences that we've had. We have to chunk it out into experiences, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's what we call experience. And so all experience is subjective. You have good experiences and bad experiences. You have experiences that reflect who you are. You have experiences of the world around you, of friends, of family, et cetera, et cetera. So when we select and collect experiences about ourselves and we generalize them at a higher logical level, we call this qualities. And when I say qualities, that has a positive connotation, but the way that we mean it in self-concept is it could be negative or positive. It's a generalization about an aspect of who you are. So if I have a bunch of negative experiences where I've screwed up many times in my life, I might generalize that as I'm a screw up, and that's a quality. That's what I believe about myself. And as you can imagine, that's going to be very limiting, and that's going to hurt. That's going to cause you some suffering. It's also going to limit your potential. But if I have successes in my life and I count even the smallest successes and I generalize myself as being a successful person, you can imagine that's going to really propel me to seek more opportunities and jump on those opportunities, not be afraid of failure because I know I'm successful. Therefore, if I have failures, that's just me learning. There's no such thing as failure, only feedback. And so when I generalize these qualities to an even higher logical level, then I get what is called self-concept, or what I've been referring to as identity. So this is a higher logical level. It's a bigger generalization. It's a generalization, a category that encompasses all of my qualities and all of my experiences. And then how I feel about this is self-esteem. If I like this generalization about myself, I experience high self-esteem. So I have successful experiences. I select and collect them. This is what I'm talking about, the structure. This is how Steve decided, well, like how is experience structured, and how is it that we structure our experiences into generalizations, especially generalizations that I like, that are positive. And how do we transform negative limiting generalizations that I make about myself into positive ones? So if I believe I'm a failure, and that's a generalization I make about myself based on all of my experiences of failing, how do I transform that into a quality of being successful? Now you might say, well, you can't because you had those failure experiences. And oh, yes, you can. What happens is if you're generalizing yourself as a failure, that means you are deleting out all of your successes and you're hyperfixating on all of your failures. And we can flip this so that you believe in yourself based on actual experiences that you've lived, real data, real information. And so we work at the level of qualities, and we transform qualities based on our values. If I value a quality and I don't feel like I am that quality, like if I value success and I don't believe I'm successful, then I'm going to suffer and I'm going to limit my potential. But if I transform that into a belief that I am successful, and that's based on actual lived experiences, which kind of like the instructions of how to be successful, and because I believe that, then I'm going to seek out those opportunities and select and collect more of that information and structure it in such a way that it strengthens my belief that I am a successful person. And that transforms my identity. Every time we transform a quality, it transforms a piece of your identity. And every time we transform into a quality that we value, that raises our self-esteem and stabilizes it. It's not like it goes up and down. And this is how confidence is also created. If I feel competent, then I automatically feel confident. We can't jump to confidence without competence. Many people try. A lot of people teach that, like fake it till you make it. It's all nonsense. There's no such thing as fake confidence. Fake confidence is fake. Real confidence is real. There's no way that fake confidence can ever become real confidence. So we can actually generate a belief or transform a belief that we are a competent person, meaning if I focus on something, if I work at something, I will become competent at it. Therefore, I'm a competent person. I just need time and effort to put into something. I can handle it, right? And if I believe that about myself, then I'm going to feel confident and I'm going to like myself. Self-esteem. So this is how the self-concept works, and it was inspired by the Swish pattern, and it's the greatest model I have ever come across, the most powerful model I've ever come across. It has absolutely changed my life, rewired my identity, and now I'm living the best life I could have ever imagined, better than I could have ever imagined. Okay. So the self-concept, in a way, shows you how to fill in all of the content and details of how to be your ideal self, and to structure it in such a way that it's strong, certain, and durable, and resilient. So that even in the face of struggle, of failure, of frustration, even when you get thrown curveballs, you get knocked down, your self-concept rebounds right back and is there when you need it most. That is what Steve Andreas had envisioned for the self-concept model. That is what he created, and that is what I teach, because it has worked in my life so incredibly well. I could go on and on about this. So Again, learning all of this stuff, the NLP, the Ultimate NLP Practitioner Training is a great place to start. It's too inexpensive for you not to get. And like I said, one of the main problems with the Swish pattern and all NLP techniques is that a lot of them are being taught incorrectly. So I created the Ultimate Practitioner Training because I wanted to get solid, good, real NLP content out there so that people could have access to that, because I struggled, even though I got good at NLP to an extent, I hit a major plateau, and it wasn't until Steve came into my life and showed me that I had learned a lot of stuff incorrectly, and it wasn't just my fault. It was, I had even some world-renowned teachers whose names I'm not going to name had taught this to me incorrectly. And he came in and corrected it, and I was like, you know what, this is too important. We need good NLP information out there. So take advantage of that while it lasts. All right, let's see, we have some comments. Is the example of eating going, oh, let's see. Let's see, is it can be auditory, yep. Ideal image, can it be, okay. Ideal audio, I would definitely create not just an ideal audio, I would create an ideal image. The visual modality is the most powerful. Why is it the most powerful? Because there is no other modality where we can access so much information simultaneously. Like when you think about, like if you look at a painting, how many colors you can see all at once versus how many voices can you hear all at once and understand what's happening. You can only maybe listen to 2 or 3. Beyond that, you can't get much more. And the same thing with feelings. Once you've hit 2 or 3 feelings, it starts to just kind of blur. So if you're doing this in the auditory modality, I would still connect an ideal image to it. All right, let's see. This is my first live from you. Follows. Okay, great. Welcome. Example of eating or going to the gym. What is the ideal image? Is it being calm? Is it saying no to junk food? What is the example? So this, hopefully by doing those exercises that I showed you, you'll understand that better. So of course you wouldn't see yourself eating junk food in your ideal image, but it's just your ideal image. It's the you who has already resolved this problem and who is living your highest ideals. All right, let's see. I guess I'm down to the bottom, okay. Some people can use oracle cards and other imagery tools to create a sense of ideal self. Can we use it in Swish? I'm not sure what that is that you're referring to. It's so important that you generate this image in your own mind. Don't rely on external images because those are static. They don't evolve, but images in your mind will evolve with you. And they're just so much more powerful when they're generated in your mind. So I would not rely on things outside of yourself. Okay, you're welcome, Justin. Can you tell me how I do Swish to see myself more successful as a coach? Well, if there's something getting in your way of becoming a successful coach, like if you find instead of working on becoming a successful coach, you end up procrastinating. So a lot of times procrastination can be similar to a compulsion. In fact, a lot of people do feel a compulsion to procrastinate. Like they have an agenda, there's something they want to accomplish in the day, they have their task, and suddenly they find themselves binging on Netflix or scrolling on YouTube or scrolling on TikTok. If that's happening, then absolutely you can use the Swish for this. So the Swish is mainly taking a bad habit, bad behavior, or a negative feeling like anxiety and swishing it to your ideal self. So if that's not happening, what I would do then is I would do a value solicitation and create a vision around becoming a successful coach. And we have those videos available on the full training that I do that is available on my channel. One of them, there's 2 parts. One of them is something like visualize this, and then the second one is overcoming resistance. So they're all there, the entire training. That's what I would use to become a successful coach. Thank you for this live stream. How do I certify myself on self-concept and practice the same? Go to selfconcept.com. You can arrange an appointment with a coach. Doesn't cost you anything. And you will meet with that coach and they will go over, well, first they want to check out if you're a good fit for the program. And then if you are, then they'll go over the particulars and the structure and how everything works. The main problem for me is that the ideal image is not realistic because there is no evidence that a guy solved all of his issues being the image devoid of content and context. So what would it look like to see an image of yourself who has done that? What would that be like? Make that image. Okay, Yeah, you're welcome, Justin. Okay. All right, great questions. Thank you so much for showing up. I love teaching this stuff. It's so powerful. Uh, it's absolutely changed my life, and I know it can change your life and give you what you're looking for out of life. So don't hesitate. Jump on this now. The only thing you're going to waste here is time if you don't get on it and start doing it right away. Can the compulsion image have a context and content? No. Oh, the compulsion, yes. The compulsion will have a context. It's best if you kind of make it a little more vague in general. So because you might be in various places when that trigger is fired. Or sometimes people have a compulsion where it's like the same thing every time, same place, same exact everything. So sometimes that happens. But if you find yourself having, like, say, social anxiety, well, in the compulsion image, you're going to need to see other people there, right? Or whatever it is that triggers you to experience the social anxiety. So a social setting would need to be the context, and that would be part of the content. So yeah, you want something like that. But as much as possible, kind of keep it vague so that it can fit in different situations. How much would the fees be the same if I am selected? You will discuss that with the coach. It's not something I really deal with anymore. So yeah, check with the coach. Like I said, the appointment is free, so you're not gonna risk, like, it's not like you have to pay for the appointment and then all that. So it's completely for free, and you're gonna enjoy the experience because the coach is a coach, not a salesperson. They are a coach, so they're gonna coach you as you're doing the appointment. And so no matter what, you're going to have a good experience doing that. Can you perform a swish pattern over the phone, or is it best to perform in person? You can if that's all you have available, but if you can do it over Skype, or not Skype, we don't use Skype anymore. Maybe some people do. Zoom, a video call. A video call works fine. You don't have to be in person. But over the phone, I mean, you can, but it's better if you can demonstrate with the person the swish. And I always do that when I'm working with someone. I say, okay, swish, and I do a sound like that, and I flip my hands so they get it. Like it just helps them swish the images. So I wouldn't do it over the phone if you can help it. But a video call, yeah, that's fine. All right, thank you so much for hanging out. This was a lot of fun, and I will see you next time.